Hey everybody, this is Leon, and today I'm going to show you the power of queries in the XR Fragments standard, well, specification, that's a better term. So what you can see here is basically a scene which has some interesting objects. Let's first focus on these two bodies over here. The funny thing about these two rotating objects is that they are actually not in this 3D model. We're looking at a 3D model here. It happens to be a GLTF file, could have been an FBX, could also have been something else. XR Fragments doesn't really care. But what you can see here is basically two empty objects with the SRC metadata. 3D properties, 3D objects can have custom properties, and various 3D formats support this, FBX, GLTF, etc. And I basically put an SRC on that empty object, and I entered a query. There you can see the hash q is cube, which basically means cherry pick an object with name cube from the current scene. So this is a very powerful way to reuse objects from a scene which is already loaded. So this means you don't need other requests to load some other file. You can just reuse things on the fly. And on the right you can see basically let me first zoom out a bit. So this is basically the scene we're in, and here on the right is actually another empty object, and here it says, the metadata says SRC with value hash q is star, which means, you know, collect all the objects from the current scene, and then minus the skybox, we don't need the clouds, we already see them, and minus the cube, and here you go. Now you can basically see a recursive instance of your scene. The recursion is limited to I think 1. It might be more, but I think at some point it will sort of drop features. So as you can see, it's not drawing a portal there, like you can see here on the left. And well, there is some finer grained control about that, but I won't go into that right now. Also, to see a bit more recursion, the predefined views, which are which you can actually see here on the buttons, these predefined views also basically affect these sourced objects. So if I press, for example, this predefined view not 2, then you see that it's hiding the 2 here. But also if I'm looking here in the object, you can also see 2 is gone as well. And you can also prevent this. You can prevent this nested querying. However, by default it is nested, and as an alternative you can basically query things, restrict queries to the root only, which is also sometimes very handy. Which is also the case. No, I won't go into that right now. Anyways, these are really simple queries. The queries are also documented here. Let me maybe make it a bit bigger. You can do all kinds of things. You can exclude things. You can sort of query classes. And you can also query certain numbers. You can restrict. So I will show you now a bit how this looks in the background, because you're probably thinking, how does this work? What is going on? What kind of magic has been embedded in this 3D model? Well, it's very simple. If we just keep an eye, for example, on these buttons. If I go to Blender, here I have the same model opened, and on the scene, here you can see the custom properties, the metadata of this scene, and here you can basically see custom properties with exactly those names. And which means that these are actually the predefined views. And if you read in the documentation, you will also see in the spec, it's mentioned that queries are only executed when embedded in the asset scene through SRC or a predefined view. This is to prevent sharing of tempered URLs. Well, what does this mean? This means basically that, oh, whoops, I clicked something. This means that you cannot just share a URL to a friend which basically removes the floor. I mean, that would be quite, yeah, that would not be amusing. Some people are afraid of this. And so you cannot really just on the fly tamper with XR fragments. There is a certain access control, and one of them is basically that the query is restricted to be embedded in the scene. And here you can see it basically in Blender. I have embedded these queries as predefined views. So here you can, for example, see hide everything which has class text. So if, for example, I press some text or interactions, then if I go to the custom properties of this particular model, then let me check. You can here see class text. So this means that if I click on hash no text, then it will basically look in the scene. Is there a custom property no text? Here it is. Then it will execute -.text, which means go through all the objects which have, for example, this text here, which have class text. So it's very simple and incredibly powerful. So this allows you to, the designer of the 3D model, to create some very simple interactions. Let me think. There is another thing I wanted to mention as well. So this star is only valid for SRC fragments. So let's go to this SRC case. So if we just like look a bit here, then you can see, hey, there are two cubes here. While in the real scene, you can see these sort of evaluated results of the source. So what this basically is, I created two placeholders. It's basically a cube. It could have been an empty object, like I said before, but just for design purposes, I just created a cube placeholder. And here you can see the metadata, the custom properties of this cube here, says SRC, and here you have exactly that query. And so this is basically where the magic happens. This imports the whole scene except the sky and the cube. So if you check here, I click cube, you can also see this is the name cube. So that will be basically hidden. And this mesh data, this cube, will be emptied. So whenever there's an SRC, the current mesh data will be removed. You will basically start with an empty scene, and then this query will sort of fill it with objects. So this is a very, very cool, powerful way to recursively reuse your own scene as a database. So I think this is sort of the gist of it. I think you should have a look at the documentation. There are just a few operators here. If you want to kind of like really filter stuff carefully, then you could also assign a real custom property to it. Let's say I'm going to give this a price, this cube. Let's say this is a web shop, and somebody can buy this cube, and so that basically means I'm going to do integers here. So I'm going to make a property name and call it price. And here you can see the price is 1. Well, personally, I think that's way too cheap for this beautiful cube. So let's make it 10. And so I don't know what happened here, but it seems to refuse this price, which means, so there's a maximum. Let's make it a maximum of 100 euros. Because we need to regulate this space. We don't need a price war. Okay, price. Oh no, sorry, I said 10. 10 euros for this beautiful cube. So now what we can do is, let's say if, let's imagine this button. If we, this not to, what if we click this, we also want to only show cubes which are less than 10 euros. Then we can just go to the scene predefined views, here to the not to, and here you can see show me everything with full class 1, full value 3, and also price. What did it say? Less than 10? So less than 10. So this means now if you will click not to in your XR supported browser, it means that our beautiful cube will not be shown because it has a metadata price 10 on it, and we just created price less than 10 here, which means that if this predefined view not to will be triggered, the cube will be gone. So this allows you to, in a very simple way, filter objects, show them, hide them, and unfortunately you cannot just tamper with the URL, the public URL yourself. You have to embed this in the document itself. And to make it, to show you really how powerful this is not limited to a 3D model. This is not limited to a A-frame 3GS application or some OpenXR application or Unity or Unreal or Godot. This is a very simple specification, which allows you to basically navigate 3D scenes, basically. So yeah, I think there's way more to explain. There is also a lot more in the docs. Yeah, one thing what I didn't show, if you really only want to hide the cube, for example, in the root scene, so not the nested src object, then you can add a slash. There is not a nested notation in this query language because it's supposed to be a very, very simple query language, and this doesn't know anything about the scene hierarchy. It's just very simple selectors, and so it's either full-on nested selectors, it will go nested, or it's just a root, and this allows the query to be incredibly simple to implement, and this also allows other people to implement their own query engine if they want. And so, yeah, the whole point of this query is just very simple cherry picking stuff and not go too far. So, I will put the documentation in the links below, and I hope you will have a great time and keep posted for some other XR Fragments videos. All right, cheers, have a nice day.